Welcome to this edition of Rattling the Bars. I'm your host, Mansa Musa. Kilmar Abrego Garcia is a household name, and what makes him a household name is the manner in which he was kidnapped from his country and taken to El Salvador prison under the pretense that he was a gang member. Where did the information come from to say he was a gang member? You'll be surprised. Joining me today is Baynard Woods, a writer and journalist based in Baltimore. His work has appeared in the New York Times, The Guardian, and the Washington Post, Oxford American Magazine, and many other publications. He is a co-author with Brandon Soderbergh of I Got a Monster, The Rise and Fall of America's Most Corrupt Police Squad. Thanks for joining me, Baynard.
Great to be here. A longtime fan of the show.
And look, so you heard when I opened up, and the reason why I opened up because you was the one that reported on Garcia, Kilmar Garcia, and the pretext they was using to initially say that he was a gang member. Talk about that.
Yeah, so it was a couple months, actually, I think already into early May, after he was first taken in mid-March off the streets, leaving a work site in Baltimore, headed down home to Prince George's County, pulled over into the IKEA, right by the IKEA down there parking lot. And then his family never saw him again. And the federal government was citing a 2019 case in which he was pulled. Mm-hmm. He was stopped with three other men at a Home Depot. And one of the cops, Ivan Mendes is his name, identified and claimed that Kilmar Abrego Garcia was a gang member of MS-13. And that was the case that banned him from being sent to El Salvador. The judge said that he couldn't, and this was months later. He was locked up for months before the judge ruled that he couldn't be sent back there because there was a good chance he could be tortured or harmed by a gang that he had refused to join there. Mm-hmm. Another irony of the story. And then 3 days later, it was only 3 days after writing that report that Ivan Mendes remained a police officer. He was suspended after those 3 days. He had already committed a crime in giving information about an investigation to a sex worker that he had a relationship with to help them avoid a police sting. And so he was ultimately criminally charged. The New Republic did some great reporting that revealed his name. And so once we had that name, I was able to go in and find the do not call list of the Prince George's County
state's
attorney. And his name was on that list as someone that's not allowed to testify. And what that means is if they stop you for a traffic stop or anything else, if their word isn't good enough to hold you on or to be used in court. And so the federal government was using the word of this cop that couldn't stand up in traffic court to justify sending a man with no due process whatsoever to a offshore's gulag in the Seacop prison in El Salvador.
And so do you think it was, in terms of that right there, because this was public information, so do you think that this was premeditated on part of the federal government, one, and two, what did in your investigation, did they ever contact Prince George's County State's Attorney Aisha Braveboy to see why she put him on do not call list, because they relying on the report of this officer. To your knowledge, one, why did they ignore it? And two, did they ever, to your knowledge, did they ever contact Prince George's County Police?
I don't think they did contact Braveboy, or I tried to speak with her and got a comment from her office. But I did get a copy. Part of it was one of the charges was redacted, but with Brandon Soderbergh, who I wrote the book with, got a copy of his Mendes's disciplinary charges from before. And so we do know that was why he was put on the do not call list. But I don't think that Homeland Security looked at that at all. I think they were all covering afterwards. I think they were just, we've over the last decades, as you well know, we've given up the Fourth Amendment in this country in many ways by allowing a racist drug war, making the worst assumptions about people that are arrested, newspapers running police allegations, police say stories all the time. And so we have so little transparency around policing and so little accountability that I don't think they ever bothered to look at the who the cop was who wrote this. They had on paper that he was a gang member, and that's all they wanted or needed.
And let's talk about that, because United States Senator Van Hollen, he had went to visit Garcia, but he said when and initially he went down there and tried to find out why, try to get them to send him back, and they pretty much like ignored him because they saying like, well, this is under Salvador jurisdiction. United States don't have nothing to do with this no more. They as it worked its way out, they just became more and more ridiculous in how they dialed down on holding on to the abuse. But he said, and I want you to address this, he said that Garcia's, this is not a unique case, that this is a particular practice that's going on in the United States as they round up and kidnap people that they consider illegal aliens or undocumented workers. Have you, in your investigation, have you seen that, or have you maybe get a sense of that this particular methodology, and the methodology being, oh, you're a gang member, you got locked up for it, and because of that, we can send you out. Not saying with how the resolution of the case, nor the fact that they saying, I'm going to take you before the court and let the court was supposed to make the determination on whether or not you had probable cause to proceed with this act. Have you, in your investigation, or do you see this as something that's like developing as we speak?
Yeah, absolutely. It's both a new strategy and the same old strategy of criminalizing street culture and street fashion.
Yeah.
One of the reasons he was deemed a gang member was because he was wearing Chicago Bulls hat and jacket, and there's been some great reporting on all of the Venezuelan, the signs of Venezuelan street culture that don't necessarily have anything to do with gangs have been used as evidence to deport the hundreds of Venezuelans that have been just snatched up in exactly that same way. And the real difference with Abrego Garcia's case is that there was a protective order prohibiting him from being sent to El Salvador. So when they sent the Venezuelans to El Salvador, many of them thought they were being sent home. And so their mothers were preparing their rooms for them. They called, I'm coming home. And then they get sent to a prison for indeterminate length of time in El Salvador instead. The reason that we know Abrego Garcia's name, one of the main reasons, is that it was illegal to send him to El Salvador, which was his country of origin, because he had to flee from threats on his life for not joining a gang.
And I read in your article where you cited that they had, his family had a business. The gang was extorting them. They was paying. The gang wasn't satisfied with that. They wanted one of the family members to join. They eventually he wound up in the United States. When Garcia, they paid to try to prevent him from being recruited by the gang. When that didn't work, they sent him to the United States. So all this information came out. All this was evidence in the initial, right? But let's talk about now. Fast forward. Okay, so after all this, they finally, in the face of being cited for contempt and possibly being the consequences of that being more severe than maintaining this farce, they finally sent him back. Where did they send him back to?
So they sent him back to Tennessee, Central Tennessee District, which is a pretty white and very conservative district, federal court district, much more so than Maryland, where Judge Zinnes is the one who's been really at war with the administration to make sure that they facilitate his return. The Supreme Court agreed with Judge Zinnes. So the last thing they wanted to do was give him a fair due process in Maryland. He was pulled over and videotaped in Tennessee in 2021 and with a car of people. And the troopers believed that they were undocumented and that he was transporting them. They're now using that, just the same way that they used his earlier encounter in Maryland. They're now using that as part of a 2-count criminal indictment, charging him with trafficking, transporting, not trafficking. They keep using the word, but of transporting undocumented people. What they did, though, as they do in so many federal prosecutions, especially, and they made it a conspiracy case, so
Right.
it's much harder for him to beat. And then they threw out all of these allegations in the indictment that they're not charging him with, which means that they don't have the evidence.
Right.
They claim that he was transporting children. So then they bring up, child trafficker.
Right.
They say that he was alleged to have abused women. No
Right.
evidence for any of these
Right.
things. And this is what they do, as you know, in so many, especially in federal conspiracy cases. They'll just load the indictments with other information that the press can pick up and use. And it colors our understanding of not only the individual case, but the way that justice works. And so it's a real miscarriage. And they say they'll be trying him in Tennessee, and they want him to remain incarcerated there until the trial.
To your point, that discourages people from wanting to participate in the process. That discourages people from supporting people like Garcia, because the arbitrary nature of the charges. Right, one, and for the benefit of our audience, is standard procedure in this country that you be having the right to due process of the law, the 14th Amendment. It's standard procedure that once you're allegedly charged with something, then in order to be charged, they have to bring evidence and information to support those charges. This is standard practice in the country. You can't just come up and say, oh, a person is a pickpocketer or a shoplifter, and then put me on a plane to El Salvador, or or take me to a prison in California. You have to bring me before someone and the accusing party got to submit their information to say, this is why we believe that he fit this criteria to be sent to El Salvador. But they avoided that, and they avoided intention because they could never present that information. So going forward, how do you think it's going to play out now? Because now, seemed like, well, initially the reports were, and President Trump and the president of El Salvador, Bukele, I think is pronounced his name, they was in the White House, and both of them was like, well, he not coming back. He's not a United States citizen. I mean, so therefore we're entitled to. But going forward, how you think it's going to play out in terms of what I just said? Because now it comes down to okay, he had a day in court where he pled not guilty. But now it comes down to, is he going to be allowed to submit information to exonerate him of this? Is the information that they had going to be looked at in order to exonerate him? Or are they going to still play this tape out and just keep throwing paint at the wall, and paint at the wall in this case be just different narrative, different charge narrative? What you think?
I think they're going to do the latter there. I mean, his lawyers are really fighting here in Maryland to have the case that they sued the government to bring him home not dropped, and have sanctions brought against the government because of discovery violations, not giving them the information that they need to be able to work on their client's behalf. And I suspect, as is so often the case in our criminal system, that there will continue to be discovery violations. But it's ultimately to say, when they're charging him simply with transporting undocumented people, I think they'll be able to prove that relatively easy, that he had a car that had people in it, including himself, that were undocumented. And so they made it a charge that would be a really difficult charge for him to beat, while then making all of these other unfounded insinuations. And so I think what they'll try to do is, and especially with probably a white conservative jury in Central Tennessee there. And then I think they will try to just deport him, and they'll, instead of deporting him to El Salvador, because there is that rule against deporting him there, I think they'll try to deport him to
Somalia.
One of the other places that they're looking to, prisons that they're setting up. And I think it's a really good example of how the xenophobia of this administration has really mixed with some of the worst surveillance state techniques of the Bush administration, with extraordinary renditions and sites that are off the country used for all kinds of torture and stuff. And so I'm still, and I know his family are still quite concerned about his safety.
As it should be.
And there was in Tennessee, there was a riot in one of the private prisons there last week because people were being on lockdown for 21 hours a day
Right.
because they're not paying enough guards to be there, COs to deal with the conditions. The food is terrible. And so there was a big protest last week. And so it's another prison for profit system, just like Bukele's doing in El Salvador with the Trump administration, that's happening to him in Tennessee.
And even further, like these private prisons, all of them have always been cited for being inhuman and dehumanizing. And because the prison industry is heavily regulated in this country, they were taking shortcuts. But now, because of this roundup call on behalf of the president, saying that he wanted over 3,000 undocumented or illegal aliens, or whatever he called them, locked up. He want ICE to lock up 3,000 of them a day. And he targeted New York, California, and Chicago as blue states, saying that that's the area he want going. But even with Trump doing what he doing, Obama was considered like he was like the forerunner for Trump, because he was sending people out left and right, and it was like it's a standard practice. I think with this administration recognized, because it was done, I think this administration and Trump being a lightning rod, I think this administration position is we're not going to, it's no pretense. We're not pretending that we're doing anything other than what we're doing. We're arbitrarily rounding people up. We're sending them to where we want to send them at. We invest a lot of money in private prisons. In theory, it's a private prison, but in fact, it's a place where they're warehousing people. And because they don't have no oversight, they're able to get away with it. But talk about when they initially got him. 'Cause I was reading an article about how when they got him up at Home Depot. Talk about who was in the car with him when they initially arrested him, and how that played out, so we can give our viewers a sense of how vicious this whole thing is. It's not just somebody just put handcuffs on and ran them up.
Yeah, so the initial case goes back to 2019, and he was going to the Home Depot to do day labor, wait out and get picked up for a job. And so he was standing with 4 other guys, and they just, the same as they're doing now, like you say, and this was in, it was in Trump's first term, but they came through and just rounded these guys up and then brought them in and started questioning them. They, as so often happens, an unnamed confidential informant was the person who said, oh, he's a high-ranking member of a gang. His hoodie and hat linked him, they said, with a clique of MS-13 that operated in upstate New York, where he'd never been before. So not a very good informant there. Right. But as so often happens, whatever you get someone to say, that's all you need is to have someone say it. In this recent case, they say they have 6 co-conspirators that they have their word that I guess they've been talking to, but of course none of them are named. Right. So in both cases, there's no ability to face your accuser. And that's just a problem that is so about law enforcement in general, of course, is the reliance on confidential informants, in which you can basically make up what they say if you're the officer, because there's so little scrutiny if you just say they're a reliable confidential informant. So they held them he was held at that time for a number of weeks in prison, waiting to finally get this trial. His son was born. He got married. His wife was pregnant. They got married in the Howard County Detention Center, so that they would be married before the son was born. And so he wasn't able to see his son. His son has special needs and is nonverbal. And the most heartbreaking thing in his wife's court documents is that the son is not being verbal, hasn't been able to express how much he misses Abrego, and so he just holds his shirts up to his face to smell them and get the scent of them. And that's his son, who's now not seen him since March the 15th. Right. So it's been 3 months now, and people who've never been taken away from their families and stuff might think, oh, only 3 months, but that's tremendous amount of time. Trauma. And tremendous number of things can happen within your life in that amount of time that you're not there for, and you're not able to help your family in any of the ways that you need to. And so, yeah, that one allegation by an officer that was only going to be an officer for 3 more days, acting as an officer, has trailed him now for 6 years, and has led to all of this, which just gave them, and the gang databases, they do this in so many cities all the time. They'll come through, take pictures of people, and then if you're seen with another person that's in those pictures, then you have gang affiliations.
Right. Yeah.
Then if someone else is seen with you, then they have it, even if it's never been proven that you were a member of a gang in any way. And so we're really using that as a way to just criminalize entire populations.
And I was reading in the article when they arrested him for this or kidnapped him for this, he had his child with him in the car.
Yeah.
And he told ICE, said, look, I got my kid in the car with me. He has special needs. So they in turn called the wife and gave her a timetable. Said, like, you got 5 minutes to come and get your kid, or we're going to send them to protective services. And this right here, okay, you're locking someone up for allegedly being in this country illegally. That's what this is what you're saying, that they're in this country illegal, or they're affiliated with element that's this country don't recognize. You're not saying nothing other than that, and so much so you saying that because of this we're gonna send you up to another country, but you're not saying that that this person represents that much danger that you can't allow for his wife to have ample enough time to come and get their child and find out what's going on him. You made it where as though, and this is the attitude that I think they create in this whole system, is the fear mechanism, where I'm coming to your neighborhood, I'm coming deep, I'm taking whoever I want to take, I'm going to the elementary school, I'm grabbing the elementary kid, I'm going to the church, I'm grabbing your grandparents, whoever I got to grab, the fear of y'all in to be more inclined to like cooperate with us, as opposed to like giving me due process of law. But closing out, what do you want to tell our audience about this system? Because you dealt with the police, you real familiar with the lack of what they call law enforcement, but I'm calling the lack of enforcement, and you deal real well with that. Talk about what you think.
Yeah, to me, this case hits at a lot of the problems with policing and authority and authoritarianism, which policing is a variety in America, because we're so used to, we see it here in Baltimore all the time, where the police say, if I have to follow the Constitution, then everything's just going to be crazy. Everyone will kill each other. And they take their violation of the Constitution as a minor matter. There are broken windows on everything else except the Constitution, and then you can violate it with impunity. And that's what the Trump administration did here. Violated the most foundational principles of this country of due process, and snatch people up without any due process, without even habeas corpus, and send them away. And you act like the issue of coming here to save your own life is a worse crime than you kidnapping someone and sending them away to a concentration camp in a country where they've been prohibited by a judge to go, then defying a Maryland federal judge, and then defying the U.S. Supreme Court, while joking with the proud dictator of El Salvador, who called himself the world's coolest dictator. While y'all joke about how neither of you can bring him back, it's a special atrocity, and what Kilmar Abrego Garcia's family is going through is just is unimaginable and irreducible, but it is also part of what we're all facing here, and what we've all allowed to happen over generations of letting the drug war and our deference to police departments erode the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution, which should protect us all from illegal search and seizure, such as these seizures that ICE is committing all around the country right now.
There you have it, illegal search and seizures. We look at this case of Garcia, and we think that, that's just his situation. But the reality is that this president unleashed the ICE and weaponized the Justice Department to go out and round up anybody and everybody, regardless of what your situation is, and not allow you to have a right to a hearing before you being punished. Because this is what's happening now. You're being punished, and then you had to fight your way back to get a hearing to undo what they did to you. We ask that you look at what's going on with Garcia. Garcia is just not the case in and of itself. You got Garcias throughout this country that they rounding up. You got Garcias throughout this world that they ran out. The xenophobia mentality of this country is becoming definite. We ask that you look at this, you evaluate. We thank Baynard for coming in to educate us on this issue. Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight. Get up, stand up, fight for your rights. That's what we ask that you do today. And guess what? We ask that you continue to watch and listen to the real news and Rattling the Bars, because after all, we are the real news.